these nasty things here. Bottle holder, it's a bit w***ish as well, isn't it? But just listen to that triple. I think for a premium bike, I just think they just look so shit. It's an absolute horse of a bike. Maybe it is. I didn't want to lay the bike down on the floor to check. Next questions. I replaced my bikes probably more than my underpants. KTM was an absolute shit show. I was just glad you didn't turn into a Starbucks GS w***er. Well, g'day folks, welcome back and welcome to my long-term review of the 2023 Triumph Tiger 1200 Rally Pro. Bit of a mouthful. Picked this bike up at the arse end of 2023. It's now 2025, so I've had the bike sort of a little over a year and a half-ish. We've just done shy of 10,000 Ks together in that time. So I thought I'd go on a little jolly sort of 100k ride and thought I'd tell you about my time with this bike over that period and that distance of riding. So if you're interested, stay tuned. See you in a few. Yeah, so welcome back to my regular viewers and welcome all together if you're new to the channel. My name's Sean, I live in Germany and I've been riding, as I said, since the arse end of 2023, the Triumph Tiger 1200 Rally Pro. But having owned the bike now for just over or just under a year and a half, thought it was about time I gave you my thoughts on it because a lot of you have been asking about it. Probably start off with a few negatives, although there aren't many at all, to be honest. I wouldn't even say they're negatives, they're sort of observations, if you like. The first thing that came to attention when I was putting the bike on and off the centre stand, it's really easy to get the bike off the centre stand, but to get it on, it's a bit of a haul, it's quite a heavy bike. And because it's tall, you really have to put all your weight onto the centre stand. And if you're not careful, you can wrap your shins off the pillion pegs on the back. Even if you do put the pegs up, if you're not paying attention, you can smash that thing straight into your shin, which isn't ideal. But that's, as I said, that's just an observation to make. Probably the next point which I'll bring up, which is actually a bit of a negative for me, are the brake and clutch reservoir pots. These nasty things here. I think for a premium bike, I just think they just look so shit. Triumph have had these for years. I mean, I had a Triumph 1250 about 13 odd years ago, and they were still using them back then. Now you can get those in a sort of an iodized pot. Iodized? Is that even a word? Don't know. Sort of the black pots. But they still get in the way. Now, for it being an adventure bike, you may wish to be a bigger tank bag on this bike if you wanted to go on large adventures. But these pots will restrict your handlebar movement if you've got a larger tank bag on. Now, you can adjust them slightly. You can loosen the screw on the pot and just tilt the pot slightly towards the back, but you haven't got that much range of movement on it before you start kinking brake lines, so not ideal, and they just look naff. I mean, when you look at other brands, BMW for example, they've got their brake and clutch reservoirs on the back of the handlebars, so they're at the back here, they're all blacked out. It's like a little pot with a top screwed into it. You don't really hardly notice them, but I just think these look a bit shit. Now, the next point I will bring up, which is kind of a positive and negative, in the fact that there's no radiator at the front of the bike. So normally you'd have your radiator down at the front of the engine at your front wheel, which you always, or I've always had to buy radiator guards for just to protect them. There's not a radiator at all at the front of this bike, which is a positive. But on the negative side, there's two on the side of the bike, or one on either side if you like. So there's a radiator down here and there's a radiator down there, which in itself isn't a negative. But the Rally Pro, as I bought it, doesn't come with upper crash bars. I bought these afterwards. You only get the upper crash bar with the Explorer, which has the 30-litre big tank. Now, you do get the lower crash bars on this bike. Now, I'm not sure if that would be enough protection if you were to drop the bike. Maybe it is. I didn't want to lay the bike down on the floor to check, so I ended up ordering the upper crash bars just to give the radiators protection, because if you were to drop this bike and it does fall stupidly or awkwardly, there is potential there for you to crush one of your radiators, which is going to be really expensive. It's expensive enough if you do drop your bike and you just scratch a bit of paint or knacker a few plastics, but if you've got to replace radiators as well, then that's going to be quite expensive. So positive in the respect that there's no radiator down at the front wheel, which you know, normally picks up all the road debris, and obviously being an off-road orientated kind of model on this bike, if you do want to potentially take it a bit green nailing, it's nice to have the radiators on the side of the bike, but as I said, it could be a negative if you drop it and you don't order the upper crash bars. Now, I've seen other users or other owners complain about the TFT Dash or the software that's within the Dash, because it's got some sort of, or it's animated, if you like. If I just push a button now without taking my eyes off the road, you can see that you slide between the sort of the menus, and there's got like an animation to it. And people say that it's too slow. They want to be able to click into the menus much faster. Doesn't bother me at all, that. But that's just one to bear in mind. Probably the only bad thing about the software on the TFT Dash is that if you want to see your odometer or how many miles you've done in the bike, you have to go through all kinds of different menus. I won't do it while I'm riding. You have to go into your bike and into your servicing, and then you can see how many miles you've done on your bike, or it tells you when your next service is due, and that's the only position where you can see your odometer or how many miles you've done on the bike. Again, people get annoyed about that. That never really bothered me. I wasn't too asked about it. I don't need to see that every time I go out on a ride, but again, it's just something to think about. But I think that is really it for the negatives. So one thing to bear in mind, perhaps, if you're someone that does like to tinker on their own bikes, which I like to do, I haven't serviced this yet because it's obviously still under guarantee, but I've had all the panellings off to wire in sat-navs and dash cams and all kinds of other stuff, electrical-wise. To take this bike to bits is slightly more difficult than what I'm used to. Mostly due to when removing panelling. Most other bikes I've ever had, panelling you can sort of pop off. I'll just show you in a sec once I get around this corner. So on my BMW S1000, for example, if I wanted to take a panel off, they pop out. But on a Triumph, you have to slide them backwards. So if you were to sort of try and pop a panel off without checking, you'd probably break the panels. So that's something to think about. It's slightly more difficult to get to bits. To take the rear wheel off, to service your calipers, or to change your brake pads, which are due soon on this. I've had the wheel off on the back, just to service the caliper and whatnot. To take the rear wheel off is a bit more of a pain in the arse than it would than on a normal sort of double-sided swing arm or a single-sided swing arm. For those of you new here, I've had a few S1000s, I've had a couple of 1290s from KTM, the GT, the 1290R, all very easy to take the wheels off. The front wheel on this bike's no problem, it's the same as any other bike, but the rear wheel on the Rally Pro is a bit more of a challenge, but nothing too drastic. But something again to bear in mind if you are someone who does like to tinker on a bike, or you are maybe new to doing it. This bike is slightly more difficult to take to bits than others I've ever had, so just a sort of an observation. But that's pretty much it on sort of negatives. If something else does pop into my head during the video, then I will just fire it in there. Right, so positives, what are we thinking? Well, there's a plethora of positives to this bike, mainly being the power and sound of this machine is phenomenal. But this 3-cylinder 1200 is an absolute peach, and it pulls like a train. I think it's around 150 brake horsepower, slightly down on what other bikes I've had before, but not to be noticed at all, really. Now, I did toy with the idea of changing the filter out on this and putting a performance filter in there. Not for performance reasons why, just to see if I could get a bit more of those or the induction roar out of the airbox. It's good as it is, but as I said, that would be a job in itself as well, because that's not just taking all the panelling off what I did before. On this bike you have to take the tank off, all the airbox, etc., so that's a bit of a tougher job. I think on the 900 you can change the air filter. I think it's down the front. I think you can take the seat off and you just take a few panels off under the seat and you can get at it that way. But on this bike, it's that's not the case. The tank has to come off, so I'm not sure if I'll tackle that or not. But obviously, being a tall adventure bike, comfort is amazing for rider and passenger. I've taken my daughter out a number of times on this, and she thinks it's the most comfortable that we've ever had. Obviously the suspension is longer suspension travel, and I've got it in the normal sort of road mode, so it's a bit more wallowy, a nicer ride. And to be honest, I don't mess about too much with all the riding modes. You got your sport, road, rain, and 2 off-road modes on this bike, and a custom one. So you can customize your own mode, because obviously if you do change stuff, you can select a mode. So for example, I could select the mode of road, but within that mode you can change everything. You can change your traction control settings, you can change your suspension settings. So you could have road throttle mapping but have a sportier suspension. You can up and down your levels of traction control, etc. You can change all of that, but as soon as you switch the bike off and back on again, obviously that mode goes back to its default setting, unless you do customize your own mode. As I said, you've got one custom mode that you can mess about with, but I haven't bothered, to be honest. Oh, well, that is another thing actually to bear in mind. I'm sure they sorted it out on the new bike, the 2024 bike, and I think, did they give it another tweak in 24 or 25? I can't remember. But the throttle is pretty snatchy in road mode, and even more so in sport. I noticed that the first time I ever did ride the bike, but now I don't notice it at all. It's just something that you get used to. But right at the start, the beginning of when I owned the bike, I was thinking, blimey, that's a bit snatchy. So sometimes, I was riding it in rain mode just to give me the nice smooth throttle response. But as I said, if you could be asked, you can make your own custom mode. But as I said, the majority of the time I've kept it in road mode. Sometimes I ride it in sport mode if I really want to get a bit of a lash on. And I've got used to the snatchy throttle. You've just got to dial in your throttle hand a bit more than what you'd used to. But some people might find that a thing that might be annoying, but as I said, I'm not bothered at all about that. It's got plenty of stuff on the bike. You've got power sockets all over it. You can charge stuff. You've got one at the front, one on the rear, under the seat. There's a phone socket, or phone bay if you like. There's a phone pocket under the seat, which I removed just so I can get some a Thunderbox in there to power all my other accessories, and you just got a bit more room then. But I took that out. But I don't know why anyone would want their seat phone under the seat. You could run a cable from the front socket into a tank bag, or I've got the Quadlock charging mount, so this charges when it's on the bike. I wouldn't ever want my phone under the seat, so I removed that. I changed the screen, did mention that before. The screen came with a big touring screen, but I didn't like that. I got a lot of buffeting. Now, it's a personal thing before you all go mental in the comments and whatnot. Some guy mentioned I should get a quieter helmet and a more expensive helmet. I don't think you get much more expensive, or too much more expensive than shoeies. So I just stuck on a small, sporty black screen, just for looks, and it's fine. It's sorted out. It's not the most quietest, but you're not gonna get it with a shorter screen. But I didn't like the double glazed window on the front either. I'm not a fan of really tall screens. Plus, for making sort of videos and content for this sort of thing, the screen's up this way, and if your screen's minging, then it kind of affects your video. But it's all personal preference. The fuel range on this bike, which you'll probably get asked about a lot, this is a 20 litre tank. Now this bike will do, as it says on there, we've been riding now for, a few Ks now, but it still says I've got 317 kilometres left in the tank. So you've got to do an average of 5.5 litres to 100 kilometres, or the equivalent in your whatever country you're in. As I said, I'm in Germany, so that's how that's measured. As I said, a good 330, good 340, 340 kilometres to 20 litres, which is pretty good, which isn't any different to other bikes I've had. Obviously, if you did want to get the big 30 litre tank, then you can go forever on that thing. But for me, I don't know. I've never really wanted a bike that's got a 30 litre tank. Now it is that much more. It's a huge bike, that. It's like the new GSA. It's an absolute horse of a bike. I don't know. A lot of the time, 99% of the time I ride in Europe, and there's petrol stations everywhere, so I've never felt the need to go for a big tank. And plus, if you are riding with others, you're filling up every time. Whoever's got the smallest tank, you fill up whenever they fill up anyway, so that kind of defeats the object. Unless you're really a solo rider and you do round the world trips or wherever, or big massive trips on your Todd, then you could probably think about getting the Explorer. You do get a couple of extra things on that bike. You get some blind spot detection systems in the mirrors, you get the upper crash bars, I think you get the heated seat on the Explorer, but I went for the smaller one. So about 340 kilometers to a 20 litre tank of fuel. Pretty good. Now, many moons ago, I did ask for you to leave me some comments or some questions, anything about the bike that you wanted answering, so I thought I'd go a few of them. So Doc9652, the features you love and hate about the bike, also a direct comparison with the BMW, would be interesting to hear. Happy New Year and stay safe. Ride safe, brother. Yeah, we'll answer that one first then. So, yeah, well, good and bad things I've pointed out already. The direct comparison to the BMW S1000 XR, I'd imagine you're referring to. Can you compare them? Yeah, possibly. I mean, this is a much taller bike, a lot sort of more suspension travel, and especially in road modes, it's a much nicer ride. It's a much wallowier ride, a softer ride. The BMW S1000 I found way too hard, the suspension. Is one of the reasons I actually got rid of it. I did love the bike, but it was just too uncomfortable on longer trips. The seat on that bike was terrible. So in comparison to that, in that respect, this is a much more comfortable bike to ride from the seat point of view. And just from the ride itself, it's a nice softer ride. Again though, if you did want to put it in sport mode, which I don't do a lot, I keep it in road the majority of the time, and you can still get a massive lick on. Now the S1000 XR, the one I had, well, what did they have? 165 brake horse, something like that. So this is down on that. This is 150, but those 15 horses, I'm not missing them at all. This thing is a weapon when you give it some beans. So comparisons wise, you can tour on both bikes, no problem. I had an issue with the comfortability. Comfortability? Is that a word? I had more of an issue with that, the S1000 XR. Which with regards to comfort, this bike is way more comfortable and you will have just as much fun on this. The only difference being as well, again, this is a much taller bike than the XR, so you have to be, I'm 6'2". If you're much shorter than that, then it might become an issue. This bike does have the automatic lowering feature on it. It's just that you press and hold the home button. Basically then every time you go under 50k an hour, the bike lowers and it will stay in the low point until you go back above 50k an hour. So that's quite a nice feature to have. I never use it because, as I said, I'm tall enough, but that would be a thing to think about if you're a shorter gentleman or shorter lady, that this bike is way taller. Next question, DBMS, what does the 1200 have that the 900 doesn't to justify the price difference? Well, obviously bigger engine, more horses. With regards to kit on the bike, they're probably similar. I've never been on the 900, never owned one, but you know, it's just an easier bike to ride. It's probably a bit more off-road orientated, the 900, because you can take a smaller bike better off-road than this bigger thing. Yeah, but regards to gear-wise, you can probably load them up just as much as this on the 1200. So it's just a personal preference thing again, if you want a big bike, or not that the 900 is small, but again, personal preference. Deb SHHC asks, hi, in the comparison to the other bikes you've ridden, does this one drop into the bends easily? They always look a bit top-heavy to me, but I'm shortish. Not even sure if my feet would reach the pegs easily on the Tigers. Yeah, as I said before, this bike would definitely is not for shorties at all. But to answer that question, does it tip in any different to other bikes? This one isn't top heavy. The previous the Triumph Tigers, or the Explorers as they used to be called back in the day, they were more top heavy than these. They've adjusted that. But it's a big bike, it's a heavy bike, so that's something to get used to, but I don't find this top heavy. And riding wise, as I said, with a 21-inch front wheel, I don't notice that it tips in any harder than other bikes. It's still a dream to ride in the twisties, so no issues there. Logue since 1980 asks about the bike, which one are you going to replace it with? Yes, I replace my bikes probably more than my underpants, but this bike is going to stay for a while. And I think if I was to change it, I'd probably get another one. Sask Rider Moto asks, reliability and ownership costs, Tiger versus KTM S1000. Would you get another Tiger 1200 or go 900? Favourite features about the ones you hate? I think I've covered most of what you've asked there, but probably one is the servicing costs. I think I've had a couple of S1000s, couple of 1290s. With regards to servicing costs, I think the cheapest ones were the S1000s. Price-wise on the bike was a bit more expensive than this one, but the servicing on the S1000 XRs was a bit cheaper. Worst servicing cost on the most expensive was from KTM. That was shocking money for servicing those bikes. As I said, the first 1,000 kilometer inspection on this, or first service, cost me, I think it was about $400, which isn't cheap when you compare it to my S1000. I think the first S1000 I had, they gave me that one for free. And the one I did pay for, the first 1,000 kilometers, was only €160, so quite a big difference. But KTM, they were well above 500, which was a bit mental. So I'm expecting, the next service on this is at 15,000 Ks, so I've still got a bit of time. Although the service light is flashing for a service, I haven't ridden it that much since the last one. So I'm probably going to wait towards the end of this season before I do another one. So to answer your question, probably the most expensive was KTM, followed by this, followed by BMW. And I'm expecting the 15,000 kilometer service on this is going to be fairly cheeky, I would have said, because that's going to be an air filter change if I don't do it myself. Because if I do put a performance filter in, that's something that doesn't have to be done, because that's the main thing you pay for, is all the labour for them stripping your tank off to change the filter. So I'd imagine, I would have said, guess, that the 15,000 kilometre service is going to be around $600, I would have said, which is still plenty. So to compare them to the S1000s, the KTMs and the Triumphs, Triumph is probably the middle runner. The cheapest to service was the BMW. To run, they're similar, because I change them so often, a set of tyres, some brakes, the normal servicing costs, that's similar on the other bike, but that's really sort of dealership costs that you have for servicing the bike. So Triumph is probably a middle runner. With regards to reliability throughout all three, BMW, Triumph and KTM, I had things wrong with every bike I've owned. It's just how you're looked after. And I was looked after more at BMW than KTM. KTM was an absolute shit show, but I bought this Triumph from a BMW dealer. They say BMW and Triumph together. So even though it's Triumph, you still get that BMW sort of service and feel in the dealership. So that's still nice. So, but reliability-wise, I've had issues with every bike. As I said, it's just how they deal with it. Barnista482 asks, I was just glad you didn't turn into a Starbucks GS wanker. Well, yeah, I'm sure I would have been hated if I'd have got a GS, but I did think about getting one, but there you go. Jovanovski, Happy New Year. Was it worth it? Did it make sense to change to the 21-inch front wheel while riding on the street? Would you do it again if you could, or would you do it again if you could bring back the time? No, as I said, I mentioned it before, the 21-inch front wheel, you don't notice it, it's already on the road. And I've done a bit of green lading, although it's illegal here, which is a lot of fun. It's a bit of a big bike to be hauling around the woods, but yeah, I don't notice it on the street, so all is well. Let's just flip across to Face Ache. What is in the left side bottle, fuel or water? Oh yeah, I put a little bottle holder. It's a bit wankerish as well, isn't it? But that's just got water in it, but I would put some fuel in there. I'll just flicking through a few questions here, a couple of comments. Simon Robinson and Mark Rowley saying, not a bike for me, but okay, all the best. Mark Bruce asks, how do you find reliability and build quality? I have the GT and the panels never seem to fit. and had a number of warranty issues. Okay. Build quality is amazing on the Triumphs. I love the build quality. Now, as I said before, taking these bikes to bits is more of a challenge on any other bike I've had. My BMWs and the KTMs were a lot easier to get all the side paneling off, the tanks, the air boxes, because I've done all that on previous bikes. I don't mind taking a bike to bits. I find it quite a challenge. But Triumphs are completely different. As I said, the panels slide to the rear once you've removed all the bolts that you need to take off. You have to slide the panel to the rear to remove it. I've never had that on any other bike. To remove your panels from other bikes, you just sort of pop them, you pull towards you and you just pop the little grommets out. Now, as I said, if you were to do that on this bike, then you'd be snapping all kinds of clips off the panels. So if you're not experienced with taking Triumphs to bits, you do definitely have to read through the user's manual, otherwise you'd be breaking all kinds of stuff. And he mentioned there, when putting back together, the panels never really seem to fit again. I've never had that issue when I've took this bike to bits 3 times now, and it's gone back together as it should. So I don't know, I always tend to take my time with it, make sure everything's as it should be, make sure there's no bolts left over. But it is a bit of a struggle to get these clips into their sort of runners, if you like, when you're sliding the panel back on. It is a bit more of an arse ache to put them back together. But build quality on the Triumph is lovely. And to be honest, this bike is probably the bike that I've had the least issues with. The only issue on this bike was, as I said, the quick shifter failed, but that's not a major thing. You know, you can still ride the bike. Well, on my S1000, my first S1000, the what do you call it in English? The camshaft failed on my first S1000. And that had to have the engine stripped out of it only after owning it for a few weeks, so that was a bit of a disaster. So that was a showstopper. My second S1000, the rear shock failed, although that was a bit of a weird one because the shock didn't fail, but the bike software thought it had failed and they couldn't do anything with it. They tried resetting the fault, taking it out, etc, etc, replacing parts. Nothing worked, so in the end they had an email from BMW and they said, bung that man a whole new rear shock in there. So the bike was again in the workshop for a few weeks. So again, that was a showstopper. And both my KTMs had issues. The clutch was it a slave cylinder or master cylinder? I think the master cylinder failed on my GT, so couldn't ride it. The exhaust servo failed on my 1290R, although I could ride it. From 180 horsepower, I think I only had about 20, because it bungs itself into its safe mode, and I was miles away from home. I think I had some other issues as well on that. The tolerance from the brake disc and the front wheel was out, so I was getting a juddering under braking, so again it went in the workshop. So without going on too much about problems I've had problems with every bike I've ever owned, but this one has probably had the least. So yeah, when you think about it in that respect, I've had the least trouble on this bike. It's been the cheapest of all the high-end bikes I've bought. It's the most comfortable bike I've ever owned. Is it the most fun? No. The 1290s, the GTs and the Rs, they were the most fun to ride. The V-twins, what an engine. Now, needless to say, this bike is not boring at all. This is so much fun to ride. It's so comfortable. You can ride it for days. You can really yomp out the miles, but you can ride it like an absolute bellend if you wanted to, and still have a shed load of fun on it. So to sum that all up, is this the ideal bike for me? Well, at this present moment in time, it is, because I was always after sort of performance on bikes I've bought, but I was sort of kind of sacrificed on comfort on all the other bikes I've owned. So still got nice performance on this, but it's much more comfortable. So for this present moment in time, and the age that I am, this is the one to have. And as I said, this thing's got so much power, and you can bang it into corners no different, maybe slightly different than the X1000s and your 1290Rs, because you've got a smaller front wheel. But as I said, it's not really much of a compromise. They've done such a good job with this bike. That's probably one to mention as well. Why did I get this bike and not the road orientated bike? It was purely for looks, purely. I rode both. Yes, okay, the road bike, is it easier to ride in a set of twisties? Well, I don't know, maybe slightly minimal. But the only reason I got this bike was for its height, because I do like a big, tall, sort of commanding road presence. It does make me feel safer on a bigger bike. Probably the main reason was the looks of this thing. The paint job on this is amazing. It looks so stunning with the white, the green, the blacks, the silvers. That was pretty much the main reason for getting the Rally Pro, is just purely for looks. And as I said, after riding both, I thought, whoa, it's not much of a road compromise having the larger front wheel. So I thought, sod it, let's get the Rally Pro. Just listen to that triple. Such a beautiful note. That make it sound so tame. Raw. Warp. Now here in Germany, and I'm not sure if it's the same in other countries, but in this country the bike came with the Metzeler, was it the Cardo Street 4s? Pretty sure. If not, I'll stick up on screen if I'm wrong. Which is kind of like a dual sport tyre, so you can do a bit of off-road on them. Great on the road, great in the wet. The set of them lasted me about 7,000 kilometers, which isn't as good as, because I was a big fan of the road 4s, the road 5s, and the road 6s from Michelin's. Fortunately, I can't get them for this bike, having the 21 front inch wheel. But I love these tyres. Yes, they don't last as long as what I'm used to, but as I said, if I want to go up a gravel track, they'll sort that out, no problem. There's enough mileage on them, and the grip for the road, phenomenal in the wet and in the dry. As I said, I'm not sure if they in other countries come with a different set of tyres, but I imagine they do. All the pictures I've seen online and whatnot seems to be the same tyre. So great tyres, happy with them. I'm on my second set on this bike. These are fairly new actually, the ones I put on. I killed the first set after getting back from Ireland. And to be honest, I'm not really interested in trying anything else, to be honest. Once you find a tyre that you can ride and you're happy with, you feel confident with, I'm not really interested in trying shit ton of tyres. So as I said, I've got a second set of these on now, and I'm happy as a pig in shit. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I can say about it now, to be honest. I've banged on for enough about it, to be honest. Hopefully I've answered everything that you wanted to know. Hopefully I've answered all your questions, and if something else that I've forgotten throughout the video, then do fire another comment or question down in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this season, although it's only just really starting for me, to be honest. I've had other commitments where I've not been able to get out as much, but there is some stuff on the cards, some exciting things to come, so look forward to that. Oh shit. Boy, it's definitely windy. I'm getting blown all over the show. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the meantime. I shall sign off for now. As I said, if I've missed anything that you want to know, then be sure to leave me your questions down below. If you did find the video beneficial, then leave me a like down below. It does help the channel no end, so many thanks for that. If you are new to the channel, then be sure to think about subscribing if you have enjoyed what you've seen today. As always, thank you to my regular viewers for watching, commenting, liking the video and all that great stuff. It's very much appreciated. But until next time, I've been Sean, and I shall see you in the next one. Take it easy.